Hey, thanks for checking out the Crossroads YouTube page. We had a chance to have John Burke, the author of Imagine Heaven and Imagine the God of Heaven, be at our church, and we did a little bit of question and answer time with him following one of his talks. What you're about to see took place on a Thursday night in our auditorium, and you got some great questions for John, and he gave some great answers. So take a look at this.
So my husband passed away about a month ago, and I was reading this book to him before, and I just want to say thank you for doing God's work and putting this book together, because it brought him and myself great comfort. So thank you for that. But I do have a question. Yeah. On all of these people that you've talked to, have you gone back and checked with them to see where they are in their faith?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, all the people that you heard from tonight are strong followers of Jesus. I'm still in touch regularly with all those people. And, you know, of the 70 people I interviewed for the new book, Imagine the God of Heaven.
It's a good one.
Huh?
I've read it. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, almost all of them are now followers of Jesus. Some are not. And that always is confusing to me, quite honestly. But I go back to, you know, Jesus appeared to Paul, and he still had a choice. Ananias said to him, you know, be baptized for the forgiveness of your sins. And he could have said, nope, got too much to lose. But he didn't. So, yeah, most that I know have. The few that have been in the presence of God and yet have come back and ended up turning away is the most confusing thing to me.
I hope it wasn't the negative NDEs.
No, the hellish NDEs. I have 3 pastor friends who, all 4, had hellish NDEs and came back seeking God like crazy and became pastors.
Oh, so they were pastors afterwards?
After.
Not before. Okay.
Not before. Yeah.
That was a little concerning.
Although in your case, I don't know.
That explains that dream the other night.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I'm so sorry for your loss. Because it's still, even knowing what's wonderful ahead, well, yeah, it's a grief with hope.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Ben?
All right, so I got 2 questions, if that's okay. First one, when people die, so a lot of people die, a lot of people get revived and don't have a near-death experience. Do they just maybe consciously forget it? Didn't happen to them? God just chooses certain people to give these experiences to?
Yeah, you ask a really good question, and I honestly don't know the answer, and I don't know how to find the answer. Not everybody who... I was hiking on a trail in Austin, and I struck up a conversation with a guy, and, you know, I kind of use this many times as a lead in to share my faith, and I did, and he goes, well, I died. And I said, well, what happened? He said, nothing. I don't remember anything. Now, in Imagine Heaven, in this book, I talk about doctors doing resuscitation on people who, during the resuscitation, when they would come back, would be in a hellish experience, having a hellish experience, even saying, you know, you got to save me, you got to save me. And in one case, this doctor, who was not even a Christian, but led the guy in a prayer that he had just learned in Sunday school, didn't believe it himself, and then the guy doesn't complain anymore about the hellish experiences. Well, the doctor interviewed him a week later and asked him, you know, what was this horrible place you were talking about? He didn't remember any of that.
Interesting.
But he remembered, after praying with the doctor, this beautiful valley, Gateway Valley, where he met his mother who had died. So, and he believes, because he became a Christian through that, and I think this is true as well, that in many cases you're dealing with such PTSD that people literally can block it out of their minds. They don't remember. So is that what's going on? I don't know. Or is it that God is just choosing some to send back because his desire is that they would testify, you know, of the reality of of his existence and of heaven and what's to come. I don't know.
That's what
Sorry.
That's what I would guess too. I was just kind of curious your answer to
But
that.
I've pondered that a lot.
And then my last question is, we see people who are atheists that this happens to, and it's so overwhelming that they become Christians. Why wouldn't God give this experience to friends of mine who are seeking, who seem to be honestly seeking, who maybe passed away or things like that? Do you think maybe God just gives them those experiences knowing that they would accept Christ in that moment? Or I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think the truth is and this is some of the stuff I talk about in the mystery of God.
I got your book too, so.
God is sovereign, and he does know all things, and he knows the future. But we also really do have a free will. Now, again, that's like a paradox to us. But even like Howard Storm, who was an atheist college professor, he is, and I like to point this out, that if someone has what I would call a shallow near-death experience, there are all these 40 commonalities I've traced. But if they only, like Howard, he thought when you die, it's just blank screen. There's just nothing. So when he dies, he's there beside his bed, and all of a sudden he feels alive and great. And he's confused because he feels wonderful, better than he's ever felt. And then these nice people come, and they're in the hallway saying, "Howard, come with us." And he thinks it's the hospital staff because he's been waiting for surgery. And they say, "We're here for you. We've been waiting for you. I'm sick. I need help." "Oh, we know. Don't you want to get better? Come with us." Okay? Now, a welcoming committee is a commonality. Feeling, extra senses is a commonality. These are all. If Howard had been resuscitated at that moment, shallow experience, he would have said, "Atheists go to heaven. It's all good, right? Nice people. I felt great." But those people deceived him and led him into an outer darkness and mauled him. Now, my point is, even in that hellish outer darkness, God was trying to reach him because he heard he said in his solar plex, "Pray to God." But what he said is, "I don't believe in God." And he hears it again, "Pray to God." He's like, "I don't believe in God, and I don't even know what I would pray. I don't even know how to pray." His ego had imprisoned him, and he couldn't even overcome his ego for a while. And I think that's an important thing to realize, is that, our ego can be our biggest prison. Howard did eventually starts just saying things with God's name in it, and these creatures back off.
Wow.
And finally he says, "Jesus, if you really are, save me." And into this darkness comes this light, brighter than the sun, picks him up, takes him out of there, and Howard gets life review. And Howard is one of the ones who came back, leaves his tenured professorship. He was a tenured professor, leaves it to become a Christian pastor. His atheist wife divorced him because she thought he was crazy.
Wow.
Well,
But I don't, here's the other thing. It's not actually a gift, because none of these people would rather be back here than there.
fair. Yeah.
So it's a responsibility.
Fair.
And it's really hard coming back. That's why I focus on those who have clinically died, and there's some evidence of it, because, it's one thing to make up a story about visiting heaven. It's another when you can show me the tracheotomy, or you have a hospital record like Dean Braxton. I was dead an hour and 45 minutes, and you have to come back and recover.
Well, I appreciate your ministry. I think this is something that's really powerful evidence. So I appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Thank you. Thanks for your question.
Hey, my name's Anthony. I'm the agnostic skeptic friend that he was referencing.
Okay, good. Great.
Yeah, so
Glad you're here.
I have a litany of questions, if nobody else does, that we can go through if you have the time.
Come a little closer to the mic.
Oh, sorry.
Because it echoes. I can't understand.
Yeah, so I have quite a few questions that might or might not pertain to your books, but My main question for you is, like, how do you define dead? When you say clinically dead for an hour and 45 minutes, what does that mean? Did he have like the brain EKG like cessation or?
Yeah. So in Dean's case, he had his kidney failure and sepsis set into his body. His heart stopped. So he has the medical records that he had no heartbeat, and your brainwaves stop, within seconds. So flatline for an hour and 45 minutes.
I was under the impression that after about 4 minutes of a lack of oxygen, you incur brain damage.
You do.
So.
I know. I don't know. I mean, and yet there they are. They come back, and they have proof. And these are not, I like to point out, these are not wacky people. I mean, you're talking about spine surgeons that I've interviewed, commercial airline pilots, bank presidents, neurologists. I mean, they have a lot to lose just making up a wild, crazy story that I went to heaven and met God. And yet they say it was the most real thing that ever happened.
I mean, I don't think I'm like negating their assertions. I was just curious how you were defining death, and how you can say that the brain waves stop within seconds. I was under the impression that brain waves continued as long as there was access to oxygen. So the brain continues functioning as long as it has the capability of doing so. And just because the heart isn't beating doesn't mean the brain has stopped.
Well, the EEG is flat. So that's what medically they watch, for signs of life. So it's clinical death. Now, I will say, I've come to believe that there's something in between what we would call clinical death and full biological death or eternal death. And I think what these NDEs are is something in between. And I've come to that because one of the commonalities that I didn't really have time to get into is these people say they come to a border or a boundary they knew they couldn't cross and still come back to this life. And in some cases, Jesus even told them, do you want to go on with us or go back? Or he would say, you have to go back. You haven't died yet. Well, but they had no brain waves, so by our definition of clinical death, they had. But I think maybe what you're getting at is, could this be something happening in the brain? Is that?
Partially, and I guess I'm also curious as to why somebody that had kidney failure and sepsis had electrodes attached to their brain.
Well, they were in the hospital, and so, they're monitoring.
Yeah, I've been in the hospital and had loved ones in the hospital for other, like, cancerous reasons that had nothing to do with their brain. And they had, like, the sensors for, like, heartbeat and salinity and O2, but they didn't have electrodes attached to their brain to measure brain function.
Yeah, well, in Dean's case, I don't honestly know if he had that, but his heart had stopped.
Right.
For an hour and 45 minutes.
And I would imagine that medical professionals would have like some sort of bag or ventilator and compressions to continue the oxygen flow throughout the body for however long he was, clinically dead.
Yeah.
To continue the oxygen to the brain, which is why he wouldn't have brain damage.
So I think there are 10 points of evidence for why it does not make sense that this could be brain-based. And, the main, one of the, and I'm not going to go into all of them.
Yeah, for sure.
But, like I said, when people say they die, they're out of their body, but they say they're still in the room observing the resuscitation. Now, when they're revived, they can report things that they should not have been able to report because they had a flat EEG. And in Pam Reynolds' case, for instance, it was deep brain surgery. She definitely had a flat EEG. She had her eyes taped shut so that no stimuli could come in. She had 100 decibel clickers in her ears so she couldn't hear anything. And yet she was able to report, after an hour into the deepest anesthesia, what the saw looked like that cut her brain open. She was able to report that when they were trying to shock her, they had to do it her twice with the paddles, and they were playing Hotel California. So all these things that, she should not have been able to report. But that's just one. There have actually been cases written up in the Journal of the American Medical Association, The Lancet, Europe's most prestigious medical journal. Over 900 scholarly articles in peer-reviewed journals have been written about this, because these verifiable observations have convinced many skeptical medical doctors. There have been studies done of 100 patients having near-death experience, claiming to have observations. Dr. Janice Holden did a study on 100 of them. Each one might have 5 or 10 observations. And what she was able to verify is that 92% of their observations were completely accurate. Another 6% were mostly accurate, maybe some details missing. 2% were inaccurate, which turned out to be one of the patients in the study. So verifiable observations is one, like that could not be brain-based, right?
Hearing is the last sense to leave, right? So a lot of what people could be perceiving could be through auditory perceptions. And I understand the one that you said, like, had Hotel California playing in her ears or whatever it was.
She had 100 decibel clickers in her ears because they wanted to make, it was deep brain surgery. They wanted to make sure there was no brain activity. So your brain is a neural network, right, of electrical impulses. That's where memories are stored. So where are these memories being stored if you have a flat EEG?
Yeah, and that's fair. I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, second, how do people blind from birth? So I've interviewed multiple people blind from birth who, when they have a near-death experience, can see. They have to adjust to this new sense. Like Brad Burroughs, who I interviewed, he was 8 years old when he had this experience. His heart had been stopped for 4 minutes. And he passes up through the room, up out of it wasn't a hospital, it was a home for blind children. And he's up above looking at the street and noticed street traffic and these, he called lights of varying brightnesses coming from what was going on in the street, and a trolley car. And he said, I was very confused because I was not sure, how do I know that when I can't really hear it? Then multiple blind people who describe the light of heaven as coming out of everything, not shining on everything. But they would have only heard on earth that it shines on everything. Yet they describe this light that is palpable. It's love and life and light all coming out of everything. Well, that's what sighted people who've had near-death experiences say as well. Why would they agree? And then secondly, why would it agree with what Isaiah says in Isaiah chapter 60? There is no sun or moon in heaven, for God is its light. Revelation 21 in the New Testament, John says he sees heaven, and he says there's no sun or moon. The glory of God is its light, and Jesus, the Lamb, is its lamp, and the nations will walk in that light. How do you explain that if that's just in the brain?
Are you asking my response, or is it rhetorical?
It's rhetorical. Okay. but even the third one is, why would these people from different religious backgrounds experience the same God if it's just in the brain? Because, and Jim, I forgot to say this, but Jim Woodford never prayed to God in his life. He had no expectation of God. Santosh had an expectation of the Hindu gods, but he met someone different. Yeah, so there are many examples like that. But for me, the study is what helps. Like this is like scientifically done. It was a professor who did the study. Anyway, it's all in there. Read chapter 2. It'll help.
Let's go right over here.
I appreciate your question, and I think that way, so like that's why I'm excited about it.
I'm short, so I got to bend it forward. Hi, I'm Jenna Golderman, Sandy Lai, and Alan Lyne's mama.
Oh, awesome.
So you knew me as Sandy's mom.
Yeah.
So what can you tell me about suicide if somebody really close to me actually had committed suicide, and I've been concerned about that my whole life. So
I have interviewed people who have committed suicide, and I think it is, well, let me say this first of all. Suicide, there's nothing in Scripture that says that suicide is the unforgivable sin. It is not God's will, because God has a purpose for all of us here on earth. And so it's undermining God's purpose. But in some cases, people who had suicides who came back and had a near-death experience met God, and he showed them why they had missed his purpose for them, and that all of them came back saying they realized suicide was a mistake. But I don't think, I know without a doubt from my research that God is pursuing people to the very end, and maybe a little beyond on their way. And so I do think, God will do whatever he possibly can except force a person's free will. He doesn't force a person's free will because love can't be forced. But he will do everything he possibly can to draw a person to turn to him at the last minute. So, I mean, that's all I can say for certain. But, salvation is a gift. Ephesians 2 says, it is by grace that we've been saved through faith. It's not of yourselves, it's a gift from God, not as a result of works. And so it's a heart turning to God. And I think, in some cases, I think that is even what happens at that last second. I think people sometimes realize, what am I doing?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question. Okay, we'll go over here.
Hi, thank you for being here. Can
you talk
Can you
in?
hear me better? So thank you for being here. I am from a very intellectual family, and you're an engineer, and very, you question everything. So the biggest thing that I've had a hard time explaining, I have a 20-year-old, brilliant, cybersecurity, all the things. And he's like, well, if God loves everyone so much, how can there be...
I can't understand.
How can there be 5, like say the big five religions, right? Mm-hmm. But when I was watching the video, there are people from different religions who came to see God, and it was the same God. So how would I be able to show him that while there are different religions that are man-based, that these people have all gone to see the same beings?
I mean, that's what I'm trying to do in Imagine the God of Heaven. I've got 70 people from all over the world that I've interviewed, and that's what I'm showing. Yeah. They are testifying to the same God who's been revealing himself throughout history, and I'm trying to show that, it wasn't near-death experiences that convinced me of God's reality, or that Jesus was revealing God. It was actually what God has put in history that he said he would do and then did, and there's proof that he did it. And I put that in the book as well, because I'm trying to show that this is not new. And I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding. They think that Jesus is the North American Christian, worst case, white God, right? It's like, no, he was Jewish. And We are grafted in, not the other way around. He didn't come to us, but he came for all the nations. And so, yeah, that is really what I'm trying to do in Imagine the God of Heaven, is show that, what God started to do, he did before any of the world's religions were formed.
See that I could tell him.
And it's in there. It's in there. Because it's true. It's like, Moses wrote this stuff down in 1500 BC. Well, none of the other sacred scriptures of the world's religions, most people don't know this because, they say, well, if I'm going to believe in God first, I got to study all the world's religions. Nobody ever does that. Well, I've read a lot of the major world's religions' sacred scriptures. I mean, you can't read all of them. It's like endless, but a lot of them. And they weren't even put in writing, many of them, until 500 BC, if not 600 AD. And so a lot of people don't even realize that.
Hello.
Hi.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer. I had a question. After doing all this research, how has God shown up in your life? And do you ever feel a little envious that he hasn't maybe shown up in the ways that people have seen him when they come back?
Yeah, because I've never had an experience like this. The thing that does keep me grounded is remembering that many of them are depressed when they come back. Dean Braxton, who's a good friend of mine on there, said, from experiencing what I experienced in heaven, when I had to come back into my body, it felt like going back into the sewer. And and others say things like, this is the shadow. That's the real thing. So being here is not easy for them. And so I sometimes think about that, like, sometimes I'm like, well, why God? Why don't I, and then I remember, like, yeah, I would never want to come back. But I think the other part of your question is, how has it affected me?
Or like how has God revealed himself in your life? Like, how do you know, just like these people know, that it was God or Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, and I write about this in the last few chapters of Imagine the God of Heaven, that that thing about joy. Like, I really did start to learn that as I learned, like Santosh was saying, to walk with God in a daily, moment-by-moment, surrendered way. I think that's what Jesus meant his last night on earth when he said, abide in me like a branch stays connected to a vine, and you will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. And I think that's what he meant. It's this staying connected just in our heart and our mind throughout the day. And as I have more and more, I have experienced at times this joy that makes no sense because the circumstances don't warrant it. And also his guidance, I've learned to hear the communication of heaven is thought to thought and heart to heart. And God communicates to us that way if we have ears to hear. Jesus said that a lot. If you have ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says, right? And as you respond to those promptings that you might think are just your thoughts, you turn around and look back and you go, oh my gosh, okay, that was the Lord guiding me. And I have a lifetime of that now. And I keep a journal. So I can see that as well throughout my life.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. And to my son, Jordan, did you hear that? God can hear your thoughts. So whenever you're alone or in school.
He set you up.
Mama!
Go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, in your experience as you're talking to these people that had gone to hell and then heaven, if there was something similar, like I had a woman who was out for 8 months in the hospital because they cut her open. She was under all this medication and everything. And when she came to, she said to the nurse to call me immediately. When the nurse called me, I got up there and she said that the Lord told her to tell me I'm on the right path. Have you had anything like that? I mean, I've had 2 people tell me that. So I wanted to know.
Don't go a different path.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm always praying to the Lord to show me the path He wants me to go on, that's, straight and narrow, and not let me weave off on the sides. But I've gotten 2 confirmation from people that was near death or who had died and then came back. And so I was just wondering if the people that you were interviewing had anything similar
Yeah,
to that.
there have been.
Where they had to tell somebody something.
Yeah, a little boy who this is kind of a wild story, but he met another little boy in heaven, and when he came back, he told his mom that they were to tell this other little boy's mom and dad that, and I can't remember the kid's name. Let's call him Josh. Josh is fine. He wants you to know everything is fine. Sell the plane and give the money to help people because God is real. Now they were agnostics. And so the mother was like, I can't do that. And she didn't even know if they had a plane. But she sends the email. She found their address, sends the email. Well, they were about to go to a medium to try to contact their son because they were like just grieved over where is he, and is he really just gone and there's nothing to him anymore? And these are the things they're thinking about. Well, they really did have an airplane. And anyway, long story short, they did end up selling the airplane, and they actually became followers of Jesus, and they went into ministry with it.
Cool.
So sometimes things like that do happen.
Yeah.
I think, and let me say, the most difficult thing about this talk, I told Rusty, is there's so much to say, and I can't say everything. And that's the most difficult part. There really is another side, and we really do go on. We really do continue. And sometimes God, I think, in His providence, does send people back with messages. But I think it's also important to say, God warns us in Scripture not to try to contact the dead. And the reason for that is the spiritual world is real, and it's not all good. And I won't go into the full of it, but when we do, I did interview a woman in Brazil who, her son died, and she was a pastor. She and her husband were pastors, but she was just obsessed with having lost him and could not let it go, could not. She even overdoses on medication from depression, and there in Jesus' presence, Jesus shows her son, but it's like there was a chasm, and she sees him, and she sees he's happy, and he says, he came into my kingdom full of joy, and he is fulfilling his purpose. Now I want you to go back and fulfill your purpose. When she comes back, she could not let it go. And she told me one day he comes into the house, just as she had longed for and was kind of idolizing. And she even rubs his head like she used to when he was after school. And at that moment, the angel that was her guardian angel that she met in her near-death experience materializes and says, you know that's not your son.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And she struggled because she so idolized him and so wanted it to be. And then she said, I know. And that was actually a demonic.
Right.
That was not really her son. And so I say that to say that's why God warns us not to contact the dead. Sometimes I believe He does send them with messages. When my dad died, I had a very vivid dream And I was sitting right by him. And then I had this realization, like, wait, you passed away. And I've heard of other things like that too. But the reason we're not to contact him is God is in charge of all that. And otherwise we can be deceived. I know you didn't ask that, but I thought, I just find that's important because
That's, you know,
Yeah, thank you.
that's terrifying. Thank you, John. We'll all sleep good now. Okay.
Oh, she's the last one.
Okay.
All right, so you didn't talk much about the near-death experiences, but I was just wondering if you read the book, The 23 Minutes in Hell, or something like that. It's pretty interesting. And that would have scared me straight, I think, to Christianity. But I just wondered, I know that talk's not about near death, or death in hell or whatnot. But I have a grandson that is struggling with his faith, whether he's atheist or not, I don't know. But I've been trying to talk to him. But I just gave him some information tonight, and I thought I had to ask this question so I can answer him. So he sends me this near death. It's called DMT, and I don't know if you mentioned in your book, this book. I read the other book. I think a friend of mine gave me that when my daughter died back in 2003. So forgive me, I'm not sure if you're the one author of that book that I read, but it was about all these interviews you had with all of the people that had near-death experiences. It's very similar to this, but do you mention DMT, and can you explain that to maybe us in a better way than I could ever experience it? Maybe I could share that with my grandson.
Well, I would ask him to read chapter 2 of Imagine the God of Heaven, because that's what I'm doing, is I'm looking at there've been like 30 different proposed alternate explanations for a near-death experience. As my medical
Well,
doc.
explain what DMT is.
DMT.
I mean, he's not going to read your book, but I probably will. But
Okay.
I'm just saying, if you could just say, is it similar to DMT, and give me some information about that.
Yeah, DMT is it's a gateway drug that gives you a hallucinogenic experience that many people say is a spiritual experience with a lot of similarities to what near-death experiencers talk about. Colors that they've never seen before, a sense of unity with everything, out-of-body kind of feeling, and they come back.
Okay, so it's not a chemical thing that goes on in your brain when you die.
Well, so, that's what I'm trying to go into to show what people who don't want it to be what most near-death experiencers say, which is, my soul lived on.
Right.
I was more alive in a place more real. So if they don't want that to be true, there are psychedelic drugs, there's DMT, there's ayahuasca, there are transcendental out-of-body meditative experiences that might actually be going to a spiritual dimension and having somewhat of a spiritual experience, but you're going in unguarded. And this welcoming committee, God sends for a reason, and people say it's to guide and on my journey and protect me. And I always would ask them, protect you from what? And they say, I don't know.
Well, yeah, demons or whatever. But
Yeah.
so I'm thinking when you die, there's not like an experience in your brain that makes you think you see light or whatever. I guess how do you even know? We haven't died, so nobody's died that really can know that. Oh, it was some chemical thing in my brain.
It's your grandson? What your grandson is saying is, oh, they already know. That's just like DMT. That's not real. It's just like what a psychedelic drug or DMT or ayahuasca produces. And I talk about that in chapter 2 of Imagine the God of Heaven.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
I think Aaron Rodgers has a whole podcast on that. Kidding. That's funny.
I was just
He
on
was
a-
into that stuff. Okay.
No, I was just on a podcast with a Navy SEAL, and we went deep
really?
into it.
Ayahuasca.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for taking my question. I know y'all were trying to wrap up, but I was hesitant in coming up here to ask the question until the gentleman came up here asking about God not being female or male. I have a friend that always gives me a hard time when I say he, when I refer to God as he. And he says that I am diminishing his power because he is nor male or female. He is just God. However, God has revealed himself to me as a father. I believe that Jesus came here as a male, and when he prayed to the Father and showed us how to pray to the Father, right? And I understand that when we go to heaven, we're gonna be a spirit. We're not gonna have a gender or sexual relations will not even happen in heaven, right? So how do I go about, explaining that to him that God is God. He is my mother, my father, my brother, my sister. He is everything, like he is describing that. But when he reveals himself to us, it's in a fatherly, masculine way. That's how he reveals himself to me. So my question to you is, out of all these experiences, has anybody ever said that God did not reveal themselves as a masculine entity?
That's a good one.
Well, I think what they would say is not either or. Some did say, I felt like I was, I was embraced like, and the love was like a mother's love. But there was a strength and a power, the problem is, it's like comparing a little toy car to a real Ferrari. They're not the same. And so even in using our mother-father language, it's so, we are wounded, sinful, broken people, so we've got all kinds of baggage. And it's hard to sort through all that. But God does have the greatest characteristics of the most wonderful Father, and a strength and an authority and a power, but also a love, and that love is nurturing and compassionate and knows us and is for us. And so, yes, some did talk about being held like in a mother's arms, or it was the most unconditional love like a mother has for a little child. And by the way, and I put this in the Imagine the God of Heaven, God says things like that in Scripture too. Jesus says, like a mother hen longs to take her chicks under her wing and protect you, so I long, to do the same for you, Jerusalem, but you would not let me, right? And there are other scriptures like that where God likens himself to a mother's love, just like a father. But I agree with you that, Jesus came as a male, and he does talk about God the Father.
Right.
So, but that doesn't negate the fact that females and males are equally created in his image. And so there is something about us together that reflects God.
Thank you.
It's really good. Hey, thanks so much for checking out our YouTube channel. For more videos, make sure that you just kind of scroll around, click on some other things, and we'd love to have you at one of our services on the weekend. Thanks so much for watching.